Austin Bohannon wasn't new to hiking, especially in this part of the woods. So when he went on this hike with his stepfather, neither anticipated that they would up in this dire situation. The Smoky Mountains are pretty remote, but both Austin and his stepfather were experienced hikers. Austin was used to the wilderness, but somehow he still lost his way even when dogs were sent out and helicopters roared overhead. They couldn't catch a glimpse of the boy. It seemed like the mountains had swallowed him up. It was a case that had some suspicious details from the beginning, and Park Chief Ranger Steve Kloster had a bad feeling in his bones. He had been involved in searches before, and he knew when someone wasn't telling the whole truth. In this case, he knew that they were running out of time. A boy had been missing in his park area for 11 days, and the chances of finding him alive were narrowing by the hour. Still, the park ranger looked over the map, pondering where the boy could be. Was the boy's stepfather to blame for his disappearance? If not, then why had he not provided vital information until later? It was just a regular day in August when Austin and his stepfather Hubert took off for a hike in the Smoky Mountains. They had walked the trail before, and it didn't usually rain this time of year, so there wasn't much to be concerned about. Austin and Hubert were well aware that situations can change in a moment, so remained vigilant. The endless terrain of trees and scrub meant that someone could become disorientated. But they had each other, and really didn't foresee anything untoward arising. They took a particular path near a creek, as there was something they had their eye on that day. That something was a plant that could fetch around $600, so they were eager to get hold of one. However, removing the plant from the national park was against the law. Hubert and Austin thought that it was worth the risk, as people were now coveting the plant more and more to make various supplements and drinks. As they made their way along the creek, Hubert lost his footing when he tried to stand on a wet rock, and when he tried to straighten up, he managed to knock off his glasses right into the water below. This wasn't good news, and he let out a shout. Hubert needed his glasses to see. He knew that he wouldn't be able to go any further into the national park, and indeed navigating any of the territories around the mountains was pretty precarious without his glasses. Austin knew this, so when he spotted what was wrong, he leaped into the water to get his stepfather's spectacles. Austin found his footing in the water and began to kick around, searching for the glasses. Hubert carefully climbed in to join him, and they began wading gently through the water. However, Hubert shouldn't have been in the water at all when he couldn't see. He didn't realize that he was actually moving away from Austin every moment, and the boy was focused on finding the glasses. When Hubert thought back on the moment, it would bring a lump to his throat. Hubert's report stated that he hadn't even registered that he couldn't see or hear Austin. He was simply looking into the water for his glasses. When he grasped that the 18-year-old was not in sight, he didn't panic immediately. They must have wandered apart. Hubert tried to move back to where he had been, but it was difficult with his sight curtailed. He called Austin, but received no reply. He reported all this to park rangers a few days later, but Park Chief Ranger Steve Kloster didn't think he was getting the full story off the older man. When Park Chief Ranger Steve Kloster got the call about Austin's disappearance, he wondered why Hubert had waited 2 days before reporting the boy as missing. They had gone walking on 11 August, but nothing was officially reported until 13 August. Kloster figured that something strange had gone down in the national park that Hubert wasn't discussing. However, he still put together a search party and went on the hunt for the boy. If he could be found, then he could provide the answers. Chief Ranger was in charge of a team of more than 100 people who went looking for Austin. He also arranged for K-9 units to support them from the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency, and helicopters were dispatched, combing the higher areas and ground for any sign of the boy. However, Austin seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Kloster became more concerned and was convinced that Hubert Dyer Jr. was hiding something about the hike. The search party worked in 90-degree weather, and Kloster waited for information. They hadn't found the boy yet. Kloster went back to the map where Hubert had said that Austin disappeared. Everyone had been through the area, including the dogs, but there was no trace of the boy. He was concerned that something bad had happened to Austin, but he hoped that he was wrong. He decided to go over the 6,700-acre area, but knew that time was slipping out of their grasp. At least it wasn't freezing, but still the boy must need sustenance. Why weren't they finding anything left behind? why was there absolutely no evidence of the boy? When he asked Hubert to pinpoint the area, he wasn't exactly clear, which Kloster found suspicious. Chief Park Ranger Kloster got in contact with Hubert once more and asked him to come and speak with him again. He knew time was of the essence, so he wanted to find out anything else he could before he called off the search. Austin had now been gone for 10 whole days. Kloster knew that the boy's stepfather had some information that he hadn't yet shared, and he hoped to persuade him to come clean. This time, Hubert disclosed one piece of information that changed everything. Hubert Dyer Jr. didn't want to admit that he and Austin had gone looking for the highly coveted ginseng plant, as he knew that it was illegal to remove them from the park. He told Kloster about the plant, and finally, the park ranger knew that Hubert was telling the truth. Hopefully, it wasn't too late. Kloster now had the plant in his possession, and he called on some guides who could advise where in the park to find these kinds of plants. Everyone was trying to keep their spirits up and not assume the worst about Austin. He had experience in the outdoors and knew the trails of the Smoky Mountains, so hopefully, he had found a way to survive. The chief park ranger was also encouraging. Now that he knew nothing untoward had happened out in the wilderness, he said that Austin's age was on his side and the fact that there was fresh water to be found throughout the national park. However, it was a concern that he had been gone so long. It had now been 11 days since Austin had last been seen by Hubert, wading in the creek. Chief Ranger Steve Kloster had carried out searches before in his 20-year career at the Tennessee National Park, but not for this long. He knew that he couldn't devote the manpower to the search for much longer, but he decided that they could give it one last go to find Austin. Then, they might have to accept that he was completely lost in the wilderness. It had now been 11 days since Austin had last been seen by Hubert, wading in the creek. Chief Ranger Steve Kloster had carried out searches before in his 20-year career at the Tennessee National Park, but not for this long. He was trying to get by, remembering the survival theory that he had learned through the years. He knew that he had to keep a clear head throughout. When he realized that he was missing initially, he made for higher ground, knowing that would give him the most chance of being seen. That wasn't the only reason he wanted to get higher up. He was trying to get some signal on his cell phone. If he could call someone then, he'd be out of there in no time at all. He was aware that there probably weren't many masts around the national park, but it was worth a shot. It felt like a kick in the stomach when he couldn't get any bars at all. Austin had planned to call his mom, as he really wanted to hear her voice. So it was time to make a new plan, one that would keep him alive. Austin needed fresh water and fast. He knew that he could go without food but no water. That meant he'd have to get to the source of the creek. He had been foraging for food with no success. His stomach had growled for a few days, but after a week, it had subsided. He must have tapped into some sort of survival mode. He thought of his mom all the time and knew that she would be so upset and worried. Austin was pretty far from where all the searching was going on. He didn't hear the helicopters overhead, and he wasn't near the river, where boats were trawling the river looking for his body, which they obviously weren't going to find. K-9 dog units were running among the trees, seeing if they could locate him. They didn't know where Austin was and he didn't know where they were. That was, until one day when he heard the helicopter rotors overhead. He couldn't see through the canopy of trees, but he was overjoyed to know that there were people still out looking for him. He knew he had to come up with a way to let them know where he was. Throughout this entire search, rescuers were either one step ahead or a little behind Austin. But on day 11, they finally saw something that made their heart leap. Up ahead, he saw a boat and some kayaks of the river. He mustered up as much energy as possible and called down to them. And when the owner of the boat looked up, he knew immediately that this was the boy they'd been looking for, and they could finally bring Austin home safely.